They mocked his endurance. Then he cradled the core that vaporized her commander. Beneath the volcanic crust of Viridia, the core crucible roared with molten life. The chamber stretched vast and cathedral-like, its walls flickering with the restless pulse of living magma. The air sizzled with the scent of ozone and the taste of danger. Upon a platform of polished jade, Princess Zirael of the Sorinth stood tall, her emerald skin luminous in the dancing light. Her crimson hair, alive with braids of gold, caught every flicker. The princess's golden eyes, sharp and searching, watched the energies spiral below, a living tapestry of power and promise. Beside her towered Commander Dravik, a monolith in obsidian armor. His shoulders were broad, his jaw set, the very image of Cerinthian dominance. He hovered at her side, one hand resting lightly on the hilt of his ceremonial blade, gaze patrolling the chamber's depths, as if daring any threat to approach. His presence was a shadow, both protective and possessive. Below them, Mason knelt on a lower deck, a solitary figure in a navy jumpsuit among the riot of gleaming Cerinthian uniforms. Where the others were loud and brash, Mason moved with quiet precision. His hands, slender but steady, adjusted the alignment of a crucial conduit, fingers gliding over crystalline panels that pulsed with inner fire. The Sorinth watched him with bemused indifference, an outsider working among giants. "Careful down there, little Terran," Dravik called, voice booming with amusement. "Wouldn't want you singed before supper." His words echoed, drawing laughter from the guards stationed along the perimeter. A few thumped their chests, clanging armor in approval. Mason didn't look up, didn't flinch. He flicked a switch, eyes narrowed in concentration. Zirael's gaze lingered on Mason's hands, so deft, so unafraid. The living fire licked dangerously close, yet he moved with the confidence of one accustomed to chaos. She saw in him something rare among her people, a quiet kind of strength, more enduring than bravado. Then the crucible screamed. A conduit ruptured with a searing flash, spraying molten plasma in a blinding arc. The guards recoiled instantly, shields raised in reflex. Sparks painted the air with streaks of white-hot danger. Dravik's smirk widened. "There it is. Let's see how the human fares now." But Mason sprang forward. He ducked beneath the hail of fire, a blur of resolve and instinct. His hands flew over the controls. He slammed a lever, rerouting the flow, while his other hand spun a crystal dial, coaxing the system back from the brink. The inferno snarled and spat, but Mason stood his ground, murmuring soft words to the machine as if soothing a wounded animal. Within moments the crisis subsided. Plasma receded, the crucible's roar softened, and the only sound was the heavy breathing of the startled guards. Mason straightened, shrouded in a haze of dissipating heat. He met Zirael's gaze from across the chamber, golden eyes locking with human blue, both unflinching. Zirael felt something foreign stir inside her. Uncertainty, curiosity. The sensation was like a fissure cracking through solid stone. She tore her eyes away, but the image of Mason, calm in the heart of chaos, burned behind her eyelids. Night fell over Viridia, the surface above shrouded in volcanic gloom, but in Zirael's private chambers, rivers of molten light flowed beyond the black glass windows. The walls glimmered with veins of fiery opal, shadows dancing as her attendants readied her ceremonial armor. Silver and violet plating curved around her form, intricate and formidable, meant to channel her bioelectric gifts. Tonight, though, it felt heavy, less a symbol of her power, more a shackle. She stood with arms outstretched as the attendants fastened the final clasps. Her mind drifted to the day's events, to the shimmer of plasma and the human who'd tamed it. The doors slid open, and Dravik entered, his stride measured, his eyes fixed on her with pride and expectation. "You were magnificent today," he declared, approaching with a confident smile. "The crucible bends to your will, as will all of Viridia. Our alliance grows stronger with each trial." He reached for her arm, fingers tracing the edge of her gauntlet. His touch was possessive, his tone low. Soon all will know the power of the Sorinth, and our union will be the forge that shapes this world. Zirael withdrew, her expression clouding. The core crystal is unstable, Dravik. I felt it. The resonance was wrong. Her voice was sharp, urgent. Mason sensed it too. He prevented disaster. Dravik's jaw tightened. He scoffed, waving a dismissive hand. The human is clever with wires, nothing more. Cerinthian strength will see us through. The core bends to those who command it, not to the whims of a Terran. Zirael's patience frayed. She stepped away from her attendants, eyes narrowing. Bring Mason to me, now. Mason stood before her minutes later, the faintest trace of soot still marking his cheek, his bearing calm and composed. He met her gaze directly, neither deferential nor insolent. Zirael dismissed the guards with a nod, her attention fixed solely on Mason. Tell me about the core crystal, she demanded. What did you sense today? Mason's voice was steady, his words measured. The crystal is alive, in its way. It responds to resonance, harmony, not domination. If you force it, it resists. If you listen, it guides you. Dravik, standing at the periphery, folded his arms with a sneer. Superstitious nonsense. Machines obey strength. Mason ignored him, eyes steady on Zirael. I've seen it before, Princess. The Crucible's power isn't a weapon to be wielded. It's a partnership. Zirael studied him, the silence stretching between them. For the first time, she felt the weight of choice pressing in. Two paths, two kinds of power. Mason's quiet authority resonated with something deep within her, something the roar of Cerinthian tradition could not touch. A subtle spark leapt between them. Recognition, respect, the promise of something unknown. Zirael let the moment linger, savoring the shift, as the molten rivers beyond her window glowed brighter, echoing the new fire kindling within her heart. On the day of the great fusion, the Crucible's heart thundered with anticipation. Zirael stood before the assembled Sorinth, her armor polished to a mirror sheen, every facet alive with the inner light of the core. Hundreds of her people filled the tiered galleries, their obsidian armor glinting, eyes fixed upon the jade dais. Dravik stood at her right, a towering sentinel in ceremonial black, the golden crest of his rank shining against the silver filigree of his breastplate. The core crystal floated at the chamber's center, suspended in a containment field, an ancient monolith alive with seething, unstable energy. Its radiance pulsed through the crucible's arteries, casting the entire space in an uneasy, shifting glow. In a control alcove high above the chamber floor, Mason watched the readouts. His fingers hovered over the crystalline panels, every sense attuned to the frequencies the core emitted. He was far from the center of attention, hidden amid a tangle of cables and surveillance lenses, but he saw everything: the ritual, the tension, the faint tremor in the crystal's song. Below, Zirael's voice rang out, strong and clear as she addressed her people. Sorinth stands on the threshold of unity. Today, we bind our fates to the power that forged our world. Let us awaken the core anew and claim our future. Dravik's posture was rigid, his gaze fixed on the crystal, jaw clenched with anticipation. The counselors began their chant, a sonorous harmony that vibrated through stone and bone, echoing the core's own resonance. Suddenly, the crystal's pulse faltered. The frequency shuddered, warping into a discordant shriek. Readouts on Mason's display flickered from deep green to a warning crimson. Zirael's voice wavered. Something is wrong. Without warning, a pulse of psychic energy erupted from the core, slamming through the neural links of the Sorinth. Warriors cried out, clutching their heads as pain knifed through their minds. Several collapsed where they stood, eyes rolling back. The gallery descended into chaos. Shouts, panic, the clang of armor against stone. Mason's eyes widened as he scanned the feedback. No, no, this can't be. He tapped a series of controls, tracing the interference to a cluster of altered settings deep within the system. In the confusion, a group of Sorinth saboteurs, cloaked in the livery of a rival house, slipped into the shadows. Their tampering had twisted the ritual into a trap. Dravik roared in defiance, his voice booming across the chamber. "Hold your ground! We are Sorinth!" He drew his energy blade and charged the dais, the weapon crackling as he pointed it at the containment sphere. "I will bring the core to heel!" "Dravik, wait!" Zirael called, her voice laced with fear. But he was deaf to her warning, blinded by pride and fury. Mason watched from his station, breath held tight in his chest. The readout screamed in protest as Dravik plunged the energy blade into the field, channeling his own power into the core. For a heartbeat, the chamber was silent, every eye fixed on the tableau. Then the crystal retaliated. Its light erupted in a blinding surge, white-hot and absolute. Dravik's outline vanished in the glare, his scream silenced as his body vaporized, consumed by a backlash he could never hope to master. The explosion rattled the crucible, sending shockwaves through the ranks of the Sorinth. Zirael staggered back, shielded by the containment field's secondary protocols, her heart pounding with horror and disbelief. Around her, the warriors lay scattered, twitching or unconscious, their neural links shorted by the psychic storm. The chamber itself trembled, fractures spiderwebbed across the core's shell. Readouts flashed crimson and gold, warning of imminent containment failure. Only Mason remained unaffected. The psychic storm washed over him, but he felt only a distant vibration, a resonance that called not for force, but for harmony. He rose from his station, weaving through the chaos. The Sorinth barely registered him, lost in agony or terror. He stepped over the fallen, approached the containment sphere, and placed his hands gently on its surface. Zirael watched, paralyzed by awe and fear. "Mason, what are you—" He did not answer. His eyes closed. He listened. To the crystal's pain, its rage, the ancient pulse of the terraforming engine at its heart. He breathed in, exhaled, and let his presence flow into the core, not as a conqueror, but as a partner. The interface flickered beneath his touch, searching, recognizing. The furious red glow within the crystal began to subside, swirling into softer hues. The discordant wail eased, replaced by a steady, tranquil hum, a color not of violence, but of renewal. Green radiance filled the crucible, bathing Zirael and the fallen Sorinth in a healing light. Mason opened his eyes, meeting Zirael's across the chamber. She saw something different in him now. Not a servant, not an outsider, but the axis upon which their fate now turned. High above, in a control alcove, an elder Cerinthian's hands trembled over ancient glyphs. Data scrolled across the holographic display. She leaned in, disbelief coloring her features as the ancient systems yielded their truth. The core crystal was no mere power source. It was an engine of creation, a terraforming relic attuned to a forgotten genetic signature, human DNA. She activated the Council's alert, her voice urgent. "Only the human can stabilize the core. He alone is compatible. Our neural signatures are rejected. His is accepted." The council erupted in panic. Councilors shouted over one another, faces contorted with fear and outrage. Some called for Mason to be brought under control, others for his immediate subjugation. A massive hologram flared to life above the crucible, the High Regent's visage, stern and commanding, projecting authority even from across the planet. "Seize the Terran. Mason must be contained, his power directed for the survival of Sorinth." Zirael stepped forward, voice ringing with conviction. "No. You saw what happened when we tried to force the core. Only Mason's willing cooperation can save us. We must trust him, give him the freedom to act, or we doom ourselves." The regent glared, torn between pride and the evidence of his own eyes. Silence fell, the fate of an entire world hanging on the fragile trust between a princess and an alien. Later, the crucible was quiet, echoes of chaos fading to a fragile calm. In the silent forge, where once only the roar of molten rivers prevailed, Mason stood alone, hands resting on a workbench. The afterglow of the core's renewal shimmered faintly through the volcanic glass, illuminating the space in soft emerald. Zirael entered, her armor muted now, every movement careful. She paused at the threshold, studying him, no longer the outlier, no longer a mere technician, but the axis on which the Sorinth now balanced. She approached, the silence between them charged. "Mason," she said quietly, "everything has changed. You are not a servant any longer. You hold the fate of Viridia in your hands." Her voice softened. "What do you want, now that the council cannot command you?" He looked up, blue eyes calm, thoughtful. "I want to do what's right. The core isn't a prize, it's a responsibility. I didn't ask for this, but I'll see it through." A hush lingered, heavier than before. Zirael nodded, a new respect in her golden eyes, and something more, a warmth, a longing she had never allowed herself to feel. The air between them thrummed with unspoken intimacy, the promise of a new alliance forged not from conquest, but from choice. As they stood together in the silent forge, the future of Sorinth and the fate of two hearts balanced delicately on the edge of possibility. Zirael began visiting Mason daily, each morning slipping from her quarters before the court had stirred, finding her way to the hidden heart of the crucible. Officially, she claimed a desire to learn the intricate workings of the forge, the pulsing arteries of Viridia's power. But as days turned to weeks, the truth became apparent, if only to herself. She came not for the machine, but for the man who had tamed it. She brought him gifts from the royal orchards, spiny ryloth fruit, its flesh iridescent, a bowl of sweet translucent Vera berries. Mason always smiled in thanks, but she noticed that he set them aside, returning instead to his modest ration of bread and mineral water. He seemed to savor simplicity, as if the taste of home anchored him amid the currents of alien fire. Their conversations grew less formal with each passing day. Zirael, in armor and regal bearing, would sit cross-legged on the obsidian floor while Mason explained the forge's living pulse. He showed her how to listen, to wait for the subtle hum beneath the roar, to sense the core's moods in the tremor of molten conduits. "Patience," Mason told her one morning, his fingers resting on a bank of controls. "Sometimes the forge is loud, sometimes it's silent. It always tells you what it needs, if you learn to listen." She smiled, frustration melting into curiosity. The Sorinth were taught to command, not to wait. He met her gaze, eyes bright with amusement. "That's why the core rebelled. Some things can't be forced." As days slipped by, she watched him in his quiet hours. Mason worked obsidian with diamond tools, shaping birds with wings poised for flight, flowers with petals so thin they seemed to tremble in the heat. He set them on the ledge above his cot, a garden born of darkness and fire, fragile and enduring. One evening, Zirael found him alone, stripped to the waist, the forge's glow painting his skin in shades of gold and shadow. He bent over a half-finished sculpture, sweat tracing the lines of his back. There, scars crisscrossed his flesh, some fine and pale, others angry and raised, one in particular curving across his shoulder like a comet's tail. She stepped closer, words catching in her throat. Tentatively, she reached out, fingertips tracing the comet-shaped scar. He flinched, muscles tensing, but did not pull away. "What happened here?" she asked softly. He exhaled, gaze fixed on the glowing coals. "A mining collapse. Years ago. I was trapped. Had to dig my way out, stone by stone. Took hours." Her hand lingered on his skin, feeling the life beneath the old wound. "You survived." "I endured," he replied, voice low. "That's my strength. Yours is different. Forceful, relentless. Mine just keeps going. He turned, guiding her hand to his chest, pressing her palm over his heart. The steady, unhurried beat thrummed beneath her fingers. Zirael felt a jolt, half electricity, half sorrow, ripple through her. "You feel that?" he murmured. She nodded, words unnecessary. For a long moment, they remained like that, suspended between worlds, speaking only in touch. A siren shattered the quiet, crimson lights flaring along the corridor outside. Mason jerked upright, grabbing his shirt and a nearby toolkit. Zirael's comm crackled. "Strike team breaching the lower sector, rival house markings. They're after the Terran." Steel filled her voice. "Stay behind me." They moved quickly, Zirael leading, Mason close at her side. The air tasted of smoke and ozone as heavy doors slid shut behind them. In the corridor, shadows flickered. Armored Sorinth warriors advanced, weapons raised. Zirael moved with deadly grace. Her bioelectric armor arced with violet lightning as she met the first attackers, her blades singing through the air. The rival Sorinth fell back, but not before one loosed a pulse round. Mason dragged Zirael into a narrow maintenance shaft, slamming the hatch behind them. "This way," he urged, guiding her through a labyrinth of service tunnels. The forge's old defenses run deeper than they know. They hurried past steam vents belching scalding vapor, Mason timing each burst so they could slip through unharmed. At a junction, he rewired a control panel, shifting a wall to seal off their pursuers. "How many hidden paths do you know?" Zirael asked, breathless. "Enough," he replied. "Stay close." Magnetic traps sparked behind them, shorting the attackers' systems, but the enemy pressed on, relentless. They emerged into the Crucible's core chamber at last, the massive crystal suspended above a churning sea of molten energy. The rival strike team cornered them, weapons bristling. Mason grabbed Zirael's hand, pulling her behind a console as bolts of energy sizzled overhead. Zirael took position in front of Mason, armor flaring with protective charge. "You want him? You go through me!" she shouted, voice echoing off the crystal walls. The attackers hesitated, uncertain. Mason worked quickly, fingers flying over a hidden control. "Hold them," he whispered. She did more than hold. Zirael surged forward, scattering the lead warriors with a sweep of her blade. Mason triggered the last defense, a pulse wave that slammed into the invaders, pinning them to the walls with a gravity surge. But the price was high. Sparks flew from the control panel, circuits overloading. The containment field flickered, and the crystal's once green light curdled to a sickly yellow, its hum rising in a discordant wail. Mason stared at the readouts, jaw clenched. The control systems are fried. If the core destabilizes now... Zirael's eyes widened. "Can you repair it?" He shook his head. "Not from here. The only way to stabilize it is to merge with the crystal, become its living regulator." Her breath caught. "Merge? You would be bound to the forge? Forever?" He nodded. "It's the only way. I can keep it in balance, but I won't be able to leave." She stared at him, the weight of sacrifice settling between them. "No, there must be another way. You can't..." Mason turned to her, eyes tender. "Zirael, this world needs you, needs Sorinth. I'm just..." She cut him off with a desperate kiss, hands fisting in his shirt. Their lips met in an embrace filled with longing and sorrow, a union of all that might have been. He pressed something into her hand, an obsidian bird, wings outstretched. "For you, to remember." She clutched it tightly, tears threatening. "I won't let you go." Mason brushed her cheek, voice breaking. "You already saved me, Zirael. Now let me save you." As he turned toward the pulsing crystal, Zirael seized his arm, pulling him into the deepest shadows of the chamber. There, hidden from the eyes of gods and warriors, they clung together in a final silent union. No vows, no words, only the promise to endure whatever fate awaited them. When at last they parted, the obsidian bird gleamed in Zirael's hand, a fragile symbol of the love born in fire. and the sacrifice yet to come. Weeks passed. The core crucible, once a battleground of volatile energies, transformed into a sanctuary of peace. Its massive chamber, carved from the heart of Viridia's volcanic stone, now glowed with a gentle, harmonious green. The air, once dense with static, shimmered softly, as if the very atmosphere had learned to breathe in concert with the living forge. At the crucible's center, Mason hovered serenely within the containment field, his body suspended in emerald radiance. Where once there had been pain and chaos, now there was only balance. His mind and the core crystal were fused in a silent communion. The borders of his consciousness expanded until they touched every vein of molten power beneath the surface. He was no longer merely human. He was the pulse that sustained Viridia, the quiet strength at its heart. Each day, Zirel watched the change ripple outward. She had cast aside her ornate battle armor, choosing instead the simple flowing robes of a leader reborn. Her hair, once bound in ceremonial braids, now tumbled loose about her shoulders. She moved through the palace's volcanic corridors with new purpose, shoulders squared beneath the weight of destiny freely chosen. Today, the High Regent and the assembled council waited in the council chamber, a grand rotunda veined with obsidian and living crystal. The air vibrated with tension as Zirel entered, her presence commanding in its calm. "Daughter," the regent intoned, voice echoing through the stone, "we have heard troubling rumors that you would open our borders, weaken our traditions, turn Viridia into a beacon for the lesser peoples." She met his gaze, unflinching. "Not rumors, truth. Viridia's strength is not in conquest, but creation. The core is a gift. The time of isolation and war is over." The counselors shifted, some murmuring in shock, others muttering in disbelief. One rose, voice sharp. "You would diminish Cerinthian might? Forsake the blood and legacy of our ancestors?" Zirael's voice rang clear as the crucible itself. "We have witnessed the cost of pride. The forge nearly destroyed us when we tried to rule it by force. Mason showed us a better path, one of partnership and harmony. Viridia will become a protectorate for all, the forge a beacon of hope, not a weapon." The regent's jaw tightened, his authority wavering beneath her conviction. "You would defy your own blood?" She straightened, light gleaming on her simple robes. "I am my own. I stand with the living forge. Challenge me, and you challenge the heart of Viridia itself." A hush fell. The counselors looked from Zirael to the luminous pulse that resonated from the depths below. There was fear, yes, but also awe. The old ways had been shattered by living proof. No one dared to speak against her. Zirael was no longer a pawn in dynastic games. She was a partner in creation, an architect of a new era. Later, the council dismissed. Zirael descended through winding tunnels to the crucible's core. The doors parted with a sigh, revealing Mason suspended in the emerald light, as serene as the dawn. His eyes fluttered open, the green glow mirrored in his gaze. He smiled, warm and knowing. "You're here." She approached the crystalline console, her hand trembling just a little as she placed her palm upon its smooth surface. The energy of the forge leapt to meet her, flowing up her arm in a rush of gentle heat. For a heartbeat, she was both herself and something greater, her thoughts, her memories, her hope all entwined with Mason's steady presence. "Every day it feels more alive," she whispered. "More like you." He reached out, a shimmer of light tracing the line of her fingers through the barrier. "And every day, I feel more of you. More of Viridia. You taught me what it means to belong." She closed her eyes, letting the energy flow between them, a bond deeper than words. "I miss your voice in the quiet," she admitted, "but I feel you everywhere." He sent back a pulse of warmth, comfort, reassurance, a promise that she was never alone. 5 years later, Viridia blossomed. Where once the sky glowered with volcanic storms, It now stretched clear and blue, streaked with pale auroras. The land surrounding the crucible teemed with life. Bioluminescent gardens spilled down the mountainsides, flowers glowing in the dusk, strange new birds soaring over rivers reborn with crystal clarity. The forge had become the heart of a new capital, its emerald beacon visible from every corner of the city. People from distant worlds walked the obsidian streets, marveling at the harmonious beauty. Cerinthian children played beside Terran, Kithari, and dozens of other peoples, laughter echoing through the air. Zirael moved among her people with a presence both regal and approachable. Where once she had been the warrior princess, she was now known as the wise governor. She listened as much as she commanded, her every decision touched by the memory of the fire and the lessons of patience Mason had taught her. Each evening, she returned to the crucible, drawn as if by gravity to the place where it had all begun. Mason was always waiting, his form more radiant than ever, his mind woven through every filament of the living forge. Their connection had evolved, transcending words. Thoughts, emotions, even memories passed between them like ripples across water. She would enter, standing by the console, and their minds would entwine in a silent communion. Tonight, as she approached, Mason greeted her with a brush of thought, gentle, teasing. "You're late. The forge gets lonely." She smiled, setting down a basket of Vera berries she still brought out of habit. The city council would not stop talking. Apparently, garden placement is now a matter of planetary security. His laughter rippled through her mind, bright as chimes. "I'm glad things are so peaceful." She leaned against the crystal, closing her eyes. "My father is coming. The regent arrives tomorrow." The light around Mason seemed to pulse with understanding. "He still hopes to restore the old ways?" She nodded, the faintest shadow crossing her features. "He never truly accepted this world. I fear what he might try." Mason reached out with a wave of calm, steady, anchoring, a touch of reassurance that flowed from the heart of the forge itself. "We've faced worse. The world is different now. The people will not let him turn back time." Zirael exhaled, letting her tension flow away into the living light. "We changed it, didn't we? Together." Mason's voice was a whisper in her heart. "We did. And whatever comes, we'll endure. This world will endure." She smiled, pressing her hand to the crystal, feeling the pulse of his promise. In that moment, surrounded by the emerald glow of creation, Zirael knew that the future, whatever storms it might bring, would always find its strength in the harmony they had forged, together. The High Regent arrived with the thunder of tradition and the arrogance of old power. His flagship eclipsed the dawn, casting a shadow across Viridia's bioluminescent cityscape as it descended on columns of fire. The landing field swarmed with his champions, gleaming in black and gold, bristling with arms and ancient pride. Their banners whipped in the wind, the emblem of Sorinth stitched in threads of crimson and bone. Zirael stood at the edge of the crowd, her bearing calm, her robes a gentle contrast to the martial splendor. She greeted him not as daughter, but as governor, her voice measured and clear. "Regent, welcome to Viridia. I trust your journey was uneventful." His gaze swept the gardens, the learning halls, the children of many worlds playing under the shadow of the crucible's emerald glow. He saw not peace, but weakness. "This was once a city of warriors," he muttered, his voice carrying to his nearest guards. "Now it teems with outsiders and scholars." Zirael led him through the living heart of her world. They walked winding paths bordered by luminous blossoms, their feet brushing dew from grass genetically coaxed to shimmer beneath alien stars. Teachers guided Cerinthian, Terran, and Kaithari children through holographic histories, laughter and questions rising into the warm air. She showed him the learning halls, where artisans shaped obsidian and crystal, where poets recited in the shared tongue of Viridia. The regent's face hardened. "Have you forgotten who you are?" he asked as they paused by a fountain, its waters catching the green light. "You were forged in battle, not in song." She met his challenge with quiet confidence. "I remember. That is why I choose this path. It takes more courage to build than to destroy." He said nothing, but his silence was heavy with judgment. That evening, beneath the vaulted ceiling of her private dining hall, they shared a meal as formal as a negotiation. The regent's champions stood guard at the door, eyes unblinking. Zirael poured wine, her hands steady. With a measured gesture, the regent produced Dravik's ceremonial blade. He laid it between them, its edge gleaming in the lamplight, a relic from another age, and a message too pointed to ignore. She regarded the blade, then looked him in the eye. "This is meant to threaten, not honor." He did not deny it. "Dravik died for tradition, for strength. You, on the other hand, let our legacy fade into softness." He leaned forward, voice sharpened by authority. "The forge must return to its purpose. Our enemies gather in the dark. Viridia's power is not for gardens and songs, it is for war. You will order Mason to resume construction of our war machines. The Empire demands it." Zirael set down her glass. Her tone was iron wrapped in silk. "No, the forge is no longer a weapon. Mason is not your servant. Viridia's strength is in unity, in creation, not in conquest." He slammed his fist on the table, making the blade tremble. "You would refuse your own blood? You betray everything the Sorinth have built." "I refuse to build a future on the bones of the past," she said, her eyes shining with conviction. "I have seen what real strength is. It is patient, enduring. It brings life, not death." Rage contorted his features. "You have been poisoned by the Terran. I will not see Sorinthian glory squandered." He rose, voice booming. "If you will not command the forge, then I shall." He stormed from the hall, his champions trailing in his wake. Zirael remained seated, the blade glinting before her, a symbol of a world she had outgrown. The regent strode through the winding corridors, ignoring the curious stares of citizens and students alike. He reached the entrance to the core chamber and swept aside the guards with a word. Inside, the crucible pulsed with serene emerald light. Mason floated in the containment field, radiant and still, his eyes closed in gentle focus. The regent marched to the console, slamming his hand down. "Mason," he barked. "By the authority of Sorinth, I command you, awaken the forge, build my armada, serve your true masters." Mason opened his eyes. Where the regent expected fear, or at least uncertainty, he found only calm. "Viridia has no master," Mason replied softly, his voice echoing from everywhere and nowhere. "Only those who care for it." The regent drew closer, brandishing his authority like a weapon. "You were a servant once. Do not forget your place." A tendril of emerald energy curled from the core, reaching gently toward the regent's temple. He recoiled, but the light merely brushed his mind. A caress, not an assault. In an instant, visions flooded his senses. He saw worlds being born, continents rising from molten seas. He felt the web of life, roots drinking deep, creatures learning to walk and sing, societies rising through cooperation, not conquest. He saw Zirael's face, radiant with hope, her hand entwined with Mason's, the pulse of the forge binding all together. He felt the patience of eons, the slow, deliberate power of creation, a force that dwarfed any army, any ambition of war. The regent staggered, clutching his head. The strength he had always worshipped, the might of blades, the roar of armies, crumbled before this deeper, enduring power. He collapsed to his knees, overwhelmed, defeated not by violence, but by the truth of what Viridia had become. Zirael entered, her presence a silent promise. She knelt beside him, her hand resting gently on his shoulder. You see now, Father. This is what we are meant to be. He looked up at her, tears tracing lines through the dust of pride. I was wrong. She nodded, helping him to his feet. Go in peace, Regent. Let the old ways rest. He said nothing more. Within the hour, his fleet rose from the surface, engines trailing gold and crimson as they vanished into the void, the banners of conquest lowered for the last time. In the hush that followed, peace settled over Viridia like a benediction. The city glowed with new promise, its streets alive with celebration and song. Zirael returned to the forge, her heart light, her steps unhurried. She entered the core chamber, where Mason waited in the gentle emerald light. He reached for her, their hands meeting over the crystalline console. For a moment, the world faded. Their connection, deep and timeless, filled the air with visions, fields of flowering light, children's laughter, the steady pulse of a planet at peace. They saw new beginnings unfolding, gardens blooming where there had been scorched earth, old wounds healing, hope taking root. Their hands entwined, Zirael and Mason stood at the heart of Viridia, guardians not of war, but of a future shaped by love and creation. And as the light grew, so did the promise that this world, at last, belonged to all who called it home. 5 years later, Viridia was a living testament to transformation. The very air seemed perfumed with the sweetness of alien blossoms, spires of blue-flamed iris, curtains of coral-pink vela, vines that glimmered with bioluminescent fruit. The city shimmered under a gentle sun, alive with music, laughter, and the harmony of many voices blending as one. Children of Sorinth, Terran, Kithari, and a dozen other species darted through geothermal parks, their games echoing between obsidian towers and crystalline gardens. Beneath it all, the forge's distant hum threaded through every moment, a song of prosperity, the pulse of a world remade. Zirael moved through her halls as both leader and friend, her wisdom sought by artisans, engineers, and poets alike. She was revered not for the steel of her rule, but for her compassion, for the way she listened, remembered every name, and bore the burdens of her people with a calm, enduring strength. Her hair, once a warrior's crimson, had softened to duskier tones, but her golden eyes retained their fire. Yet every day she found herself drawn downward, past the bustling agora, beneath the learning halls, and into the living bones of Viridia itself. Down spiral stairs of volcanic glass, through corridors echoing with the songs of the core, Zirael descended toward the sanctuary that had become the true heart of the world. The core chamber was a cathedral of crystal and warmth. Lattices of emerald and amethyst arched overhead, refracting the forge light into a kaleidoscope that danced across the floor. At its center, within a containment field that shimmered like morning mist, Mason waited, no longer merely a man, but the presence woven into every breath of the planet. He was radiant, composed, his blue eyes serene. The light of the forge flickered across his skin, a living constellation. As Zirael approached, the containment barrier rippled and parted for her alone. She stepped through, feeling the gentle caress of energy, and crossed the threshold into the circle of Mason's arms. He greeted her with a smile, familiar and new each time. "You smell like sunlight and garden pollen," he teased, brushing a stray lock of hair from her cheek. She laughed, her voice low and warm. "And you still smell of fire and midnight. I brought you something." She produced a tiny bundle, 3 Vera berries, luminous and sweet. He accepted the gift, letting their fingers linger in the exchange. "I taste everything through you now," he murmured. "The city, the wind, the ocean miles away. But I still remember these." They sat together on a bench grown from the crystal itself. Outside, the world moved on, governance, commerce, the small dramas of daily life. But here, in the forge's heart, time slowed. Their moments of silent communion were precious, wordless conversations of thought and memory. She would rest her head against his chest, and in the space between heartbeats, she heard the rhythm of 1,000 lives, the story of a world continually reborn. Sometimes she would ask, "Do you ever regret this?" Her voice was quiet, her doubts rare but honest. Mason would draw her close, pressing her palm to the center of his chest. "Never. I have purpose here, and I have you." Their love had become something larger than romance. It was woven through the city's fabric, the peace between the peoples, the gentle renewal of land once scarred by war. Together, they met every new challenge not with force, but with unity and wisdom. When drought threatened the northern valleys, Mason redirected the geothermal streams. Zirael brokered cooperation between rival clans. When old grievances flared in the city, they called for dialogue, not arms. When a sickness swept through the gardens, Mason's attunement to the forge isolated the pathogen, and Zirael organized relief with swift, steady hands. One evening, as dusk painted the city in molten gold, an urgent message reached Zirael. A tremor of unrest had stirred at the city's edge. Old loyalists of the Empire, fearful of the changes, had begun to gather. Some whispered that the age of creation had made the Sorinth weak. Zirael met with her advisors, her face grave. "We must hear them. Not all wounds are healed. Not all hearts accept peace so easily." Mason's presence shimmered in her mind, calm as ever, as, "You are not alone in this," she replied, both in thought and aloud. "We built this world together. Let us face its storms together too." She went among the people, speaking not as a ruler, but as a neighbor. Mason's subtle guidance drifted through the city. Lights brightened where crowds threatened darkness. Music swelled in streets that teetered on violence. The unrest broke, not with the clangor of arms, but with the slow thaw of understanding. The Loyalists saw their children laughing with Terrans, heard the stories of gardens planted where barracks once stood, and slowly laid down their anger. Later, in the chamber of the forge, Zirael pressed her brow to Mason's, breath mingling with the pulse of the core. It worked. Not with orders, not with swords, with patience, with hope. He smiled, the light of the world flickering in his eyes. "You taught me that, and you taught them." She smiled back, a tear slipping free, of relief, of gratitude, of love deepened by trial. Years rolled on, and the old empire faded into myth. Viridia became a haven for all who sought creation over conquest, knowledge over domination. The city flourished. New species arrived, adding their colors and songs to the tapestry. The parks grew brighter, the learning halls filled, and the stories told at dusk were of unity, not war. Through it all, Zirael and Mason remained true partners. Her courage, his endurance, each sharpened and tempered by the other. He was the world's steady heartbeat. She was its guiding hand. When hardship threatened, they stood side by side. He, the patient wellspring of the forge; she, the leader unafraid to change and grow. On the eve of the Festival of Renewal, Zirael once again found herself drawn downward, heart thundering with anticipation. In the core chamber, the forge glowed brighter than ever, alive with the promise of the future. She stepped into the containment field, the barrier opening for her as always. Mason stood before her, radiance and humanity mingled in every breath. She pressed herself against him, resting her head against his chest, feeling the enduring beat that sustained their world. The warmth of him flowed through her, grounding her as surely as the planet's core. His arms enfolded her, gentle but unbreakable. "I love you," she whispered, the words as old as time, as new as every dawn. He kissed her brow, the forge's song swelling around them. "We have forged a new destiny, not in fire and conquest, but in love, patience, and the quiet strength of a human heart. Together, they stood at the heart of Viridia, guardians and creators, shapers of a world reborn. The future stretched before them, bright and boundless, theirs to shape, together. This brings our story to a close. Don't forget to hit subscribe, give the video a like, and share in the comments which part you enjoyed the most. Our team will truly appreciate your support. There are plenty more exciting stories waiting for you on our channel. See you in the next video.